What's the scariest thing that happened to you on Halloween? I'm Melissa, and I need to tell you about Halloween 2019, the night that changed everything I thought I knew about my family and my entire childhood. It started with a text message from Rachel. We'd been best friends since kindergarten, the kind of friends who shared everything, who knew each other's deepest secrets, who promised we'd be in each other's weddings someday. But we hadn't spoken in almost 3 years, not since I moved to Portland for work and she stayed back in our hometown of Brookfield, Massachusetts. The text was simple: having a Halloween party at the old Reeves house. You should come. It's been too long. The Reeves house. Just seeing those words made my stomach drop. That abandoned Victorian mansion on Maple Street had been the center of so many of our teenage adventures. We'd sneak in through the broken basement window, explore the dusty rooms, make up stories about the family who used to live there. The Reeves family had moved out suddenly in 1987, and the house had sat empty ever since. The town couldn't sell it because of some legal dispute about the deed. It became our place. Mine and Rachel's. I stared at that text for a solid 10 minutes. My finger hovered over the delete button at least 5 times. Because here's the thing. Rachel wasn't just my former best friend. She was also my ex-boyfriend Derek's current wife. Yeah, you heard that right. My best friend married my ex-boyfriend. They got together 6 months after Derek and I broke up. 6 months. Rachel called me crying, saying she never meant for it to happen, that they'd run into each other at a bar and just clicked, that she needed my blessing because our friendship meant everything to her. I gave it to her. I smiled and said I was happy for them and acted like it didn't feel like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it burst. We stayed friends for another year after that, but it was different. Everything was different. Every time the 3 of us hung out, I felt like I was watching a play of my own life with the wrong actress in my role. They got engaged. I couldn't take it anymore. So I took the job in Portland and left, but now she was inviting me back to our place. On Halloween, I should have said no. Any sane person would have said no, but something in me needed to go back. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that I'd moved on. Maybe I was just stupid. I texted back, "I'll be there." The drive from Portland to Brookfield took about 2.5 hours. I left Friday afternoon, October 31st, and watched the sun get lower in the sky as I drove east. I told my boss I was taking a long weekend to visit family. That was technically true. My mom still lived in Brookfield. I was planning to stay with her, but I hadn't told her about the party. I hadn't told anyone. This felt like something I needed to do alone. By the time I pulled onto Maple Street, it was almost 7. The sun had set and the street was already full of trick-or-treaters. Little kids in princess costumes and superhero capes running from house to house with their parents trailing behind. I felt a weird nostalgia watching them. Rachel and I used to trick-or-treat on this exact street. We'd always save the Reeves house for last, daring each other to run up to the porch even though we knew no one would answer. The Reeves house looked exactly the same. 3 stories of peeling white paint and broken shutters. The porch sagged in the middle. Several windows on the upper floors were shattered, but tonight there were cars parked all along the street in front of it, and I could see lights inside. Orange and purple string lights hung across the porch. Music thumped from somewhere inside. Rachel had really done it. She'd thrown a party in our abandoned house. I parked a block away and sat in my car for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel. My hands were shaking. This was ridiculous. I was 28 years old, a successful marketing director at a tech company. I'd dated other people since Derek. I was over it. I was fine. So why did I feel like I was 16 again? Scared and uncertain and desperate to be anywhere else. I forced myself to get out of the car. I'd worn jeans and a black sweater, nothing special. I hadn't even dressed up for Halloween. As I walked toward the house, I could see people through the windows. Shadows moving, laughing, drinking. I recognized some of the cars. Tom's red pickup truck, Amber's silver sedan, people from high school, people I hadn't seen in years. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The house was transformed. Someone had strung lights everywhere, covering the water-stained walls and the peeling wallpaper. There were at least 30 people crowded into the front rooms, all dressed in costumes. A vampire, a witch, someone in an inflatable dinosaur costume that kept bumping into people. Music played from a Bluetooth speaker in the corner. There was a folding table set up with bottles of alcohol and red Solo cups, and there was Rachel. She stood in the middle of the living room, wearing an elaborate Cleopatra costume, complete with a black wig and gold jewelry. She looked beautiful. She always did. And next to her, with his arm around her waist, was Derek. He was dressed as a Roman soldier or something. They matched. Of course they matched. Rachel saw me and her face lit up. She squealed and rushed over, throwing her arms around me. "Melissa! Oh my God, you came. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up." She smelled like the same perfume she'd worn in high school. Something floral and sweet. It made my chest hurt. "Yeah, well, couldn't miss this," I said, trying to sound casual. "You actually got permission to use this place?" Rachel laughed. "Permission? No, but who's going to stop us? The house has been sitting here empty for 30 years. We're not hurting anything. Besides, this is our house, Mel. Ours, remember?" Derek walked over, a beer in his hand. "Hey, Melissa. Long time?" He gave me an awkward half hug. Up close, I could see he'd put on some weight. His Roman soldier costume was a little tight around the middle. It made me feel oddly satisfied. "Hey, Derek. How's married life?" "Great, actually. Really great." He squeezed Rachel's shoulder. "We just found out we're expecting." "Rachel's pregnant." The room tilted slightly. I felt my smile freeze on my face. "Wow, congratulations. That's amazing." Rachel was beaming. "We haven't told many people yet. Only family and close friends. But I wanted you to know. I wanted you to be here for this." "I'm honored," I said. And I meant it, sort of. Mostly, I just wanted to run back to my car and drive the 2.5 hours back to Portland and pretend this night never happened, but I didn't. Instead, I grabbed a cup and filled it with whatever punch someone had made in a large bowl. It tasted like fruit juice and cheap vodka. I drank it in 3 long gulps and poured another. The next hour passed in a blur. I talked to people I barely remembered. Tom from biology class, who was now an electrician. Amber, who'd been on the cheerleading squad, now working as a dental hygienist. Everyone had stayed. Everyone had built lives here in Brookfield while I'd run away to Portland. They all seemed happy. They all seemed fine. They asked about about my life in the city like it was some exotic foreign country. I gave them the highlights and left out the part where I'd been feeling lonely and disconnected for months. Around 9, someone suggested we explore the upper floors of the house. The party had mostly stayed on the first floor, but the Reeves house had 3 stories plus an attic. We'd only explored the first 2 floors as teenagers. The 3rd floor and attic had always been too scary, the stairs too unstable. But we were adults now, and we were drunk. So a group of about 10 of us grabbed flashlights from someone's car and headed for the stairs. Rachel led the way, still in her Cleopatra costume, holding Derek's hand. I stayed toward the back of the group, next to Tom and his girlfriend Jessica. The stairs creaked ominously under our weight. Someone made a joke about the whole staircase collapsing and killing us all. Everyone laughed nervously. The 2nd floor was just as I remembered it. Long hallway with rooms branching off on either side. Bedrooms mostly, all empty except for the occasional piece of furniture too worthless to take when the family moved out. We walked through slowly, shining our flashlights into the dark rooms, making jokes to cover up the fact that this place was genuinely creepy at night. At the end of the hallway, there was a narrow staircase leading to the 3rd floor. The door at the bottom was closed. It had always been closed. As teenagers, we'd tried to open it a few times, but it was locked, and we'd never been brave enough to break it down. But tonight, the door was open, just slightly ajar, like someone had been up there recently. Rachel stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Did anyone open this? Everyone shook their heads. The group had gone quiet. The music from downstairs seemed very far away. Maybe it was always open and we just never noticed, Derek suggested. But his voice sounded uncertain. No, Rachel said. I tried this door last week when I was setting up for the party. It was locked. I'm sure of it. Last week? I asked. You were here last week? She nodded. I came by a few times to clean up and hang lights. I wanted the place to look nice. Did you come alone? Yeah, why? I didn't answer. I was staring at that slightly open door, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. Someone had been here. Someone had unlocked that door. Tom pushed past us and started up the stairs. Come on, it's probably just the lock broke or something. Let's check it out. We followed him up. The stairs were even narrower than the ones to the 2nd floor, barely wide enough for one person. The wood groaned under our feet. At the top was another hallway, shorter than the one below, with only 3 doors. The first 2 rooms were empty, just bare walls and floors, cobwebs in the corners. But the 3rd room was different. The door was wide open, and inside there were things, furniture arranged like someone had lived there. A small bed with a bare mattress, a dresser, a rocking chair in the corner, and on the walls dozens and dozens of photographs. They were tacked up with pins, covering nearly every inch of the walls. Even in the dim light from our flashlights, I could see they were old, faded color photos from the 70s or 80s. Rachel stepped into the room first. She walked slowly to the nearest wall and leaned in close, studying the photos. Oh my God, she whispered. These are all of the same girl. I moved closer. She was right. Every single photograph showed the same person. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with long dark hair and a serious expression. In some photos, she was sitting in a chair. In others, she was standing in what looked like a backyard. In one, she was holding a doll. But in every single picture, she looked directly at the camera with the same unnervingly intense stare. Who is she? Amber asked. Must be the Reeves' daughter, Derek said. I heard they had a kid who... He stopped abruptly. Who what? I asked. Nothing. Just old town gossip. But Rachel was still staring at the photos. She'd gone pale under her Cleopatra makeup. This is weird. This is really weird. Why would they leave all these photos here? Why would they arrange them like this? Maybe they didn't, Tom said. Maybe someone else did. After they left, the room suddenly felt very cold. I wrapped my arms around myself. We should go back downstairs. But Rachel had moved to the dresser. She pulled open the top drawer. Inside were more photos, stacks and stacks of them, all of the same girl. Rachel picked up one of the stacks and started flipping through them. Then she stopped. Her hand started shaking. Rachel? Derek moved to her side. What is it? She held up a photo. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. This is my mom. I moved closer. The photo showed 2 women, both in their 20s, standing in front of a house. Our house. The Reeves house. One of them I didn't recognize. The other one I did. It was Rachel's mom, Linda. She looked young, maybe 25, with long blonde hair and a wide smile. She had her arm around the other woman, who was also smiling but looked more reserved. Your mom knew the Reeves family? I asked. Rachel was still staring at the photo. She never told me. She never mentioned them at all. I didn't even know she'd been in this house. She kept flipping through the stack. There were more photos of the 2 women together. At the beach. At a restaurant. In someone's living room. They looked close. Like best friends. Then Rachel found another photo and gasped. It showed the same 2 women, but now they each held a baby. They were standing in a hospital room, both wearing hospital gowns, both looking exhausted but happy. The photo was dated on the back. September 14th, 1991, my birthday. That was my birthday. Rachel's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the photos. Melissa, this can't be right. This can't be on. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes, and I knew. Before she said anything else, I knew. My stomach dropped through the floor. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the dresser to keep myself upright. Our moms had babies on the same day, Rachel whispered. In the same hospital. The same room. Look. She held up the photo. I couldn't breathe. The 2 women holding babies. One was Rachel's mom. The other looked exactly like Rachel's mom, but with darker hair. And the babies. I couldn't tell them apart. Who is the other woman? Derek asked. Rachel flipped the photo over. On the back, in faded pen, someone had written 2 names. Linda Hayes and Catherine Reeves. The room went silent. Reeves? I repeated. The woman's last name was Reeves. She lived here. She was the Reeves family. Rachel nodded slowly. She looked like she might pass out. Why would my mom have a picture of her having a baby with the woman who lived in this house? Why would they be in the hospital together? Why? She stopped. Her eyes went even wider. Oh my God. Oh my God, Melissa. What if something happened that day? What if the babies got mixed up? What if... Don't, I said sharply. Don't say it. But she'd already said enough. The thought hung in the air between us. Impossible to ignore. 2 women having babies on the same day. In the same room. Best friends. And one of them lived in a house they abandoned suddenly in 1987, 4 years before Rachel and I were born. return. One of them disappeared from town and was never heard from again. And Rachel and I had been inseparable since kindergarten. We'd always joked that we were like sisters, that we were more family than friends. This doesn't mean anything, Derek said, but his voice was uncertain. It's just a coincidence. Two friends having babies at the same time? That's normal. Rachel wasn't listening to him. She was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear mixed with something else. Recognition, maybe. We need to talk to my mom. Right now. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they'd been filled with concrete. Rachel, wait. Let's think about this. Think about what? Melissa, what if we're... She couldn't finish the sentence. She shoved the photos in her purse and headed for the stairs. We're going to my mom's house. Now. The party was over after that. Rachel made some excuse about not feeling well. People slowly filed out, shooting us worried glances. Derek tried to calm Rachel down, but she wasn't having it. Within 20 minutes, the house was empty except for the three of us. Rachel, Derek, and me. We drove to Linda's house in separate cars. Rachel and Derek in his truck, me following behind, my mind racing. This was insane. This couldn't be real. There was no way that Rachel and I were. But the more I thought about it, the more little details started clicking into place. The way we'd always looked oddly similar despite supposedly not being related. We had the same nose, the same shape of eyes. People had commented on it when we were kids. You two could be sisters, they'd say, and we'd laugh. It was just a coincidence. Just one of those things. Except now maybe it wasn't. And my mom, I'd always felt like something was off with her, like she was hiding something. She'd been overprotective when I was a kid. Paranoid almost. She never wanted me to get my DNA tested for one of those ancestry websites. She'd gotten angry when I suggested it, which wasn't like her at all. And she'd been weird about me being friends with Rachel. Not in an obvious way, just small comments here and there. Maybe you should branch out. Make other friends. Spend less time with the Hayes family. At the time, I thought she was just being a typical overprotective mom. But now, Linda's house was a small ranch-style home on the other side of town. Her car was in the driveway. Rachel didn't bother knocking. She burst through the front door and marched into the living room, where Linda was sitting on the couch watching television. Linda looked up, startled. Rachel, what's wrong? What happened? Rachel pulled the photos out of her purse and threw them on the coffee table. You want to tell me about these? Linda's face went white. She stared at the photos for a long moment, then looked up at me standing in the doorway, her eyes filled with tears. Oh no, 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 no. You weren't supposed to find those. How did you? The Reeves house, Rachel said. Her voice was shaking. We were at a party there. We found a room full of photos of you and Catherine Reeves at the hospital with babies, with us. Linda closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Sit down. Both of you, please. We sat. I felt like I was in a dream. A terrible, surreal dream that I couldn't wake up from. Linda took a deep breath. Catherine Reeves was my best friend. We grew up together, went to school together. She was like a sister to me. We got pregnant around the same time. We were so excited. We planned to raise our children together, to be the family we'd both always wanted. She paused, wiping at her eyes. We went into labor on the same day, September 14th, 1991. We were in the same hospital room. We had our babies within an hour of each other. Two perfect baby girls. But something happened, I said quietly. My voice didn't sound like my own. Linda nodded. Catherine had complications. Severe bleeding. They had to take her for emergency surgery. She almost passed away. She was in surgery for hours. During that time, the nurses took both babies to the nursery. When Catherine came back, she was sedated, unconscious. The doctors weren't sure if she'd make it. Rachel's face was frozen. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Linda said quickly. I didn't, but the nurses. There was confusion. So many babies in the nursery that night. Catherine's baby had been crying, fussy. Mine was calm, sleeping. When they brought the babies back, I think they might have gotten them mixed up. Given me Catherine's baby and given Catherine mine. The room tilted. I gripped the arm of the couch. You think? I don't know, Linda said, her voice breaking. I'll never know for sure. The babies looked so similar, and Catherine was unconscious. By the time she woke up, hours had passed. The babies had been tagged, documented, given to us. I kept thinking I should say something, that something felt wrong. But I didn't. I was too scared. And then Catherine took her baby and left the hospital, and I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just being paranoid because of the stress of childbirth. But you weren't wrong, Rachel said. Her voice was cold. Were you? Linda shook her head. A few weeks later, Catherine called me. She was hysterical. She said something was wrong with her baby, that it didn't feel right, that she felt like the baby wasn't hers. I told her she was just experiencing postpartum depression, that all new mothers feel that way sometimes, but she wouldn't let it go. She became obsessed. She started taking photos of the baby constantly, like she was trying to prove something to herself. She'd compare them to photos of herself and her husband as babies. She was convinced there'd been a mistake at the hospital. And you didn't tell her? I said. You didn't tell her you had the same feeling. Linda's face crumpled. I was terrified. If I admitted I thought there'd been a mistake, they'd investigate. They'd do DNA tests. And if they found out the babies had been switched, they'd make us switch them back. And by that point, I'd had Rachel for weeks. I loved her. She was my daughter. I couldn't give her up. I couldn't. So you did nothing, Rachel said flatly. I tried to calm Catherine down. I told her she was being irrational. I started avoiding her. And then Linda stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth. Then what? I asked, though I was pretty sure I knew. Catherine couldn't take it anymore. She told her husband she wanted to do DNA testing on the baby. He thought she was crazy. They fought constantly. Their marriage fell apart. And one night in 1987, Catherine took the baby and disappeared. Just packed up and left. Nobody ever heard from her again. Her husband searched for years but never found them. The house sat empty because legally she still owned half of it, and without proof of death, they couldn't sell it. Eventually, everyone forgot about it. Forgot about her. Rachel stood up abruptly. She looked at her mom with an expression of pure betrayal. You let her leave. You let her take a baby that might have been yours, and you did nothing. What was I supposed to do? Linda cried. Tell her the truth and lose you? Ruin both of our lives? I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if Catherine left town, she'd get help. She'd realize she was wrong. She'd come back. I never thought she'd disappear forever. You knew, Rachel said. Her voice was eerily calm now. All these years, you knew that Melissa might be your biological daughter, that I might be Catherine's, and you said nothing. everything. You watched us be best friends, watched us grow up together, and you never said a single word. I wasn't sure, Linda whispered. I was never sure. It was just a feeling, a fear. I had no proof. I finally found my voice. My mom, does she know? Linda looked at me and her expression changed, became guarded. I don't know what Catherine told her. Catherine is my mom, I said slowly. Catherine Reeves. She changed her name. She moved away. She raised me as her daughter. That's who my mom is. Linda didn't deny it. She just closed her eyes. The pieces were falling into place now. My mom's paranoia, her secretiveness. The way we moved around constantly when I was a kid, never staying in one place for more than a few years. The way she'd refused to talk about my father, about our family, about anything from the past. She'd been running from this town, from this truth, from the possibility that I wasn't really hers. And she'd been right to run, because I wasn't hers. I was Linda's daughter. I had to be. That's why she'd taken me. That's why she disappeared. We need to do DNA tests, Derek said quietly. He'd been silent this whole time, just watching. That's the only way to know for sure. Rachel turned to look at me. We stared at each other for a long moment. Two women who'd been best friends their whole lives, who'd shared everything, who were supposed to be in each other's weddings. Except now maybe we weren't best friends at all. Maybe we were sisters. Maybe we'd been stolen from each other before we'd even had a chance to know our real mothers. I don't want to know, Rachel said suddenly. I don't want to do a DNA test. I don't want to know the truth. Rachel, Derek started. No, she said firmly. Think about it. What good would it do? We can't change the past. We can't undo what happened. If we find out that our mothers were switched, then what? Do we call the police? Try to press charges against a hospital that probably doesn't exist anymore? Try to force Catherine to come back and explain herself? This happened 34 years ago. It's too late to fix it. But don't you want to know who your real mother is? I asked. Rachel looked at Linda, then back at me. I already know who my real mother is. She's the woman who raised me, who took care of me when I was sick, who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my homework and held me when I cried. That's my real mother. DNA doesn't change that. But what about Catherine? I said. What about my mom? She's been living with this for 34 years. Don't you think she deserves to know the truth? Maybe, Rachel said. But that's between you and her. I'm not going to dig up the past just to destroy everyone's lives all over again. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Derek followed her, giving me an apologetic look. And then they were gone, leaving me alone with Linda. Linda looked at me with red, swollen eyes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Melissa. I never wanted any of this to happen. I just wanted to protect my daughter. Which daughter? I asked. The one you raised or the one you left behind? She didn't have an answer for that. I drove back to my mom's house in a daze. It was almost midnight. The trick-or-treaters were long gone. The streets were empty and dark. I kept thinking about that room in the Reeves house. All those photos of a little girl staring at the camera with those intense, serious eyes. Catherine had been obsessed with that child, with me, with trying to prove that I was hers, and she'd been right. My mom was still awake when I got there. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in front of her. She looked up when I walked in, and I saw it immediately. The guilt, the fear, she knew. She'd always known. You went to the Reeves house tonight, she said. It wasn't a question. I sat down across from her. We found the room, all the photos. We talked to Linda. My mom closed her eyes. I was afraid this would happen. That's why I never wanted you to be friends with Rachel. I tried to keep you apart when you were little, but you were drawn to each other, like you knew, like some part of you recognized each other. Tell me the truth, I said. All of it. And she did. She told me about the hospital, about the complications, about waking up to find a baby that didn't feel right, about the months of obsession and doubt and fear, about Linda's refusal to consider that anything was wrong, about her husband thinking she was losing her mind, about the DNA test she'd secretly ordered that took weeks to come back, about the results that confirmed what she'd suspected all along. The baby they gave me wasn't mine, she said. She was Linda's biological daughter. And my baby, you, were with Linda. I showed the test results to my husband. I told him we needed to get our real daughter back, but he didn't believe me. He thought I'd faked the results. He threatened to have me committed. He said if I didn't drop it, he'd take the baby and I'd never see her again. So you took me and ran, I said. She nodded. I couldn't leave you there. You were my daughter. Mine. I'd carried you for 9 months. The fact that Linda had raised you for the first few months didn't change that. So yes, I took you. I changed our names. I moved far away, and I spent the next 34 years making sure Linda could never find us. You abducted me, I said quietly. Legally, that's what you did. You took a child that belonged to someone else. You belonged to me, she said fiercely. You were mine from the moment you were conceived. That hospital made a mistake. I was just correcting it. I sat there in silence, trying to process everything. My entire life had been based on a lie. No, not a lie. A mistake. A terrible, tragic mistake that two women had tried to fix in their own ways. Linda by pretending everything was fine. Catherine by taking back what was hers. And Rachel and I had been caught in the middle. Two babies switched at birth, raised by each other's mothers, never knowing the truth. Does Rachel know? My mom asked. Does she know she's my biological daughter? She doesn't want to know, I said. She refused to do a DNA test. She said it's too late to change anything, that it doesn't matter. My mom's face crumpled. She's probably right. I gave up my biological daughter 34 years ago when I took you and ran. I don't have any right to her life now. Linda raised her. Linda is her mother. She reached across the table and took my hand. Just like I'm your mother. No matter what DNA says. I'm the one who raised you, who loved you, who sacrificed everything to keep you. I pulled my hand away. You stole me. From a woman who lost her best friend, who spent decades not knowing what happened to her biological daughter. Don't you think she deserved to know the truth? Maybe, my mom said, but I couldn't take that chance. If I'd told Linda the truth, she would have fought for you, gone to court, and the courts would have sided with her because she was the one who'd raised you from birth. I would have lost you. So I did what I had to do to keep my daughter. I stood up. I felt sick, dizzy. I couldn't be in that house anymore. I need to go. Melissa, please. I need time to think, I said, about all of this, about what it means. I drove around town for hours, past the high school Rachel and I had attended, past the park where we'd hung out as teenagers, past all the places that held memories of our friendship, our sisterhood maybe. I didn't didn't know anymore. I didn't know anything anymore. Around 3 in the morning, I ended up back at the Reeves house. The party was long over. The lights had been taken down. The house sat dark and empty once again, holding its secrets. I used my phone's flashlight to navigate through the first floor, past the plastic cups and empty bottles, up the stairs to that third floor room. All the photos were still there. Hundreds of pictures of me as a baby, of me as a toddler. Catherine had been obsessed with documenting every moment because she'd missed the first few months, because she'd been trying to make up for lost time. I sat down in the rocking chair and cried for Catherine, for Linda, for Rachel, for the life we all could have had if things had been different, if the nurses hadn't made a mistake, if Catherine hadn't been taken for emergency surgery, if Linda had been brave enough to admit the truth, if my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Are you okay? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, I don't know. Are you? No. A pause. Then, can we meet? I need to talk to you. We met at a diner on the edge of town. One of those 24-hour places that mostly serve truckers and people with nowhere else to go. Rachel was still in her Cleopatra costume, though she'd taken off the wig. She looked exhausted. We sat in a booth in the back and ordered coffee neither of us touched. I lied, Rachel said finally. Earlier, when I said I didn't want to know, I do want to know. I need to know. It's going to drive me crazy if I don't. Me too, I admitted. But I'm scared, she continued, because if we find out the truth, if we confirm that our mothers were switched, then everything changes. Our entire lives become different. We can't unknow it once we know. Everything already changed, I said. The moment we found those photos. We can't go back to how things were before. She nodded slowly. So what do? I took a deep breath. We do DNA tests. We find out for sure. And then we figure out what comes next. What if I'm really Catherine's daughter? Rachel asked quietly. What if she was looking for me all these years and I was right here being raised by her best friend? How do I live with that? How do I live with knowing my mom abducted me? I countered. That the woman who raised me took me from another family? We're both going to have to find a way to process this, Rachel, no matter what the tests say. We sat in silence for a while. Then Rachel reached across the table and took my hand. Whatever happens, we're still us, right? We're still Melissa and Rachel. Best friends, sisters maybe. That doesn't change. I squeezed her hand. That doesn't change. We did the DNA test the next day, ordered kits online and paid for rush processing. Then we waited. Rachel went back to her house with Derek. I stayed with my mom, though things were tense between us. She kept trying to explain, to justify what she'd done. I couldn't listen to it. Every time she started talking, I'd leave the room. The results came back 2 weeks later. We met at that same diner to open them, sat in the same booth, ordered the same coffee we didn't drink. Rachel opened her envelope first. Her hands shook as she pulled out the paper. She read it quickly, then looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. I'm hers, she whispered. I'm Catherine's biological daughter. It's a 99.9% match to your mom. I opened my envelope, already knowing what it would say, what it had to say. The DNA confirmed what we'd suspected. I was Linda's biological daughter. Rachel was Catherine's. We'd been switched at birth, and we'd spent our entire lives being raised by the wrong mothers. I should have been raised by Linda. Should have grown up with Rachel as my sister instead of my best friend. Should have lived the life that was meant to be mine. Instead, Catherine had taken me and run, and Linda had let her, and 2 babies. Had lost their real families before they'd even had a chance to know them. What do we do now? Rachel asked. I didn't have an answer. What could we do? We couldn't undo the past. We couldn't go back and fix the mistake. We were adults now, with our own lives, our own identities. Changing our birth certificates wouldn't change who we'd become. I think, I said slowly, we move forward. We tell our moms that we know. We decide what kind of relationship we want to have with them, with our biological mothers. And we figure out how to live with this knowledge. Can I meet her? Rachel asked. Your mom, my biological mother. Can I talk to her? Yes, I said. And I want to talk to Linda, to my biological mother if she's willing. We arranged a meeting at Linda's house. All 4 of us. Linda and Catherine, Rachel and me, the 2 mothers, and the 2 daughters, finally in the same room together after 34 years. It was awkward at first. Catherine and Linda hadn't seen each other since 1987. There was so much hurt and betrayal and anger between them. They sat on opposite sides of the room, not looking at each other. Rachel sat next to Catherine. I sat next to Linda, our biological mothers, the women who'd carried us, given birth to us, had their babies taken away. Linda spoke first. I'm sorry for everything, for not speaking up when I suspected the mistake, for letting you leave, for all the years you spent not knowing. I was a coward. I prioritized my own feelings over your right to know the truth about your daughter. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'm sorry too, for taking Melissa without asking, for disappearing, for making you wonder. All these years, what happened to your biological daughter? I was so consumed by my need to have my baby back that I didn't think about what it would do to you, or to Rachel. They looked at each other then, really looked at each other for the first time in decades, and something passed between them. Understanding maybe, or forgiveness, or just shared grief for the situation they'd both found themselves in. Can I ask you something? Rachel said to Catherine. Did you love me when you thought I was yours? Catherine's eyes filled with tears. So much. You were my whole world for those few months. When I realized you might not be mine, it broke my heart. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted the test results to be wrong. But once I knew the truth, I couldn't stay. I couldn't raise another woman's child knowing my own daughter was out there somewhere. And did you love me? I asked Linda. From the moment they handed you to me, Linda said, you were perfect. You were mine. Even after Catherine left and I realized what had happened, I couldn't regret it, because if we'd switched you back, I would have lost you. And I couldn't bear that thought. We talked for hours about the past, about what could have been, about how different our lives might have looked if the hospital hadn't made that terrible mistake. Rachel might have grown up as Catherine's daughter, moved around constantly, never staying in one place. I might have grown up as Linda's daughter, stayed in Brookfield, had had a stable childhood, we might never have met, never become friends, never developed the bond that had defined both our lives. But then again, maybe we would have. Maybe we would have found each other anyway. Maybe that's what Linda had meant when she said we were drawn to each other. Maybe on some deep level, we'd recognized each other as family. I never moved back to Brookfield. My life was in Portland, and I needed distance to process everything. But I talked to Linda regularly. Video calls, phone calls, occasional visits. We were building a relationship slowly. It wasn't mother-daughter, not in the traditional sense, but it was something. A connection to my biological origins. An acknowledgement of where I'd come from. Rachel did the same with Catherine, my mom, her biological mother. They met for coffee sometimes, talked about Rachel's pregnancy, about what kind of grandmother Catherine would be. It was strange and complicated and messy, but they were trying. And Rachel and I, we stayed close. Closer maybe than before, because now we knew the truth. We were sisters, biological sisters who'd been raised apart, who'd found each other anyway through pure chance. We joked that we'd been drawn together by our DNA, by some invisible thread connecting us. Rachel had her baby in June, a little girl. She and Derek named her Catherine Linda, after both grandmothers, after the two women whose choices had shaped all our lives. I held that baby in the hospital and felt something shift in my chest. This child was my niece, my biological niece, Rachel's daughter, Catherine's granddaughter, Linda's biological granddaughter. We were all connected now in ways that were too complicated to explain to outsiders, but we understood. The four of us, two mothers and two daughters, trying to make sense of a mistake that had changed all our lives. Halloween rolled around again the next year. Rachel texted me asking if I wanted to come back to Brookfield for a party, not at the Reeves house this time, at her and Derek's place. A family party, she said, with Linda and Catherine and little Catherine Linda. I drove the 2.5 hours from Portland, walked into Rachel's house and saw my two mothers sitting together on the couch, each holding the baby, talking and laughing like old friends reuniting after a long separation, which in a way they were. Rachel handed me a glass of wine. Best Halloween ever, she said with a small smile. I thought about the year before, finding those photos, learning the truth, having my entire world turned upside down. The scariest thing that had ever happened to me on Halloween? Yeah, I said. Best Halloween ever. Because here's the thing. The truth had been terrifying. Learning that my life was based on a hospital's mistake and my mother's desperate choice had shattered everything I thought I knew about myself. But it had also given me something I never knew I was missing. A sister who was really my sister. A biological mother I could finally know. A family that was complicated and messy and hurt in ways we were still trying to heal, but family nonetheless. And sometimes that's what family is. Not perfect. Not simple, but real. Built on truth, even when that truth is hard to face. I looked around the room at these women who'd shaped my life in ways both intentional and accidental. At Rachel, my best friend and sister. At Catherine, the mother who'd raised me. At Linda, the mother who'd carried me. At baby Catherine Linda, who would grow up knowing her family's complicated history and hopefully learning from our mistakes. We'd all lost something that day in 1987 when the hospital switched two babies. But we'd found something too. We'd found each other, finally, completely. And we were going to figure out how to be a family despite everything, because of everything. That was the scariest thing that happened to me on Halloween, and also the best.